Is this a great game or what? Tim and Jeff Kurkjian, and today our guest is Doug Glanville.
Podcast 13, Lucky 13.
Lucky number 13, and Doug's going to be joining us because the game at Rickwood is going to be this Thursday. Very important at the history of the game. We're going to talk to him about the Negro Leagues, the integration of those statistics, about the East-West game that was at Cooperstown, and so much more. I'm really looking forward to having him on, but we have a kind of a special guest joining us right now live in studio. I'd like to welcome my wife, Emily, and our daughter, McKinley. Hi, sweet girl.
Hi, Punky. Look at her.
So this is my dad, his third grandchild, second granddaughter. This is McKinley. And in recording this, we had Father's Day just yesterday, and McKinley has a Father's Day present for you.
Really?
Yep. Hold on. McKinley, you want to give that to Pop-Pop? Here you go.
Here you go.
Oh, this is not going to go as well as I thought it would. There you go.
Oh, happy Father's Day, Pop-Pop.
It says...
From Love McKinley.
And
how about that?
It's a baseball that has her handprint on it. So for Father's Day, she got me one, and she got you one as well.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you, McKinley Hope. Pop-Pop will put that in my office as soon as I get home,
There
okay?
you go. All right.
Put it right here.
You want to say anything? Say, Mama. Nope. Okay. All right. Here you go, Mama.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, McKinley.
We're over. We love you. Bye, McKinley. Wow.
Bye. Well, first off, what did you do yesterday on your first Father's Day as a father?
So we spent my first Father's Day. McKinley, 10 months old now, crazy, and I just wanted to stay at home. We have a pool in our backyard, and I have spent weeks getting it ready. You know how that feeling is.
And you got a vacuum to vacuum the pool?
A pool vacuum to help me out.
When does that arrive?
That should get here today or tomorrow.
All right.
Amazon
I'm glad
Prime.
I won't be here when it arrives.
I know.
You can vacuum by yourself.
It's a robot, so it does it all on its own.
Oh,
it's a
really?
robot vacuum. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we just hung out in the pool and we sat on the back porch and we watched baseball tonight.
Right.
And then we watched baseball all day and we ate some amazing food. We did burgers on the grill. My mother-in-law makes the most amazing macaroni salad in the world. And we just kicked it, had some beers in the backyard. It was beautiful out. I mean, I know you were in the car for this Father's Day. But
600 miles in the car yesterday on Father's Day. Quite a life I've carved out for myself.
Do you remember your first Father's Day?
I actually do. I'm not sure this is a great story, Jeff, but it was June 16th, 1991. So Kelly Kurkjian is 3 months old, and we're having a party at our house because it's Father's Day. It's the first time I've been, but I'm working at Sports Illustrated, and I had to file my baseball column every Sunday. And then if anything happened during the Sunday, because press was late Sunday night, I had to work all day Sunday if something big happened.
Right.
So just when I think I'm clear for the day on Sunday, Otis Nixon of the Braves stole 6 bases in one game. So that set the National League record for steals in a game and tied the Major League record set by Eddie Collins in the early 1900s for most steals in a Major League game. So I spent the rest of Father's Day trying to find Otis Nixon. Again, Jeff, it's 1991. There are no cell phones, so I had to stay at home and hope that eventually I could find him on a getaway day and he would call me back, and eventually he did. So I got the story in, but that's how, unfortunately, work-wise, I will remember my first Father's Day chasing Otis Nixon around after he stole 6 bases in one game. I'm just so proud of you for being such a good young man and how you haven't forgotten all the lessons that we taught you as a kid. The 3 things I always told you to never forget, and you haven't, is, you have to be kind to people. You have to be respectful for people, and you have to always remember that there is no such thing as an infield fly rule on a bunted ball. Now, if you remember those 3 things for the rest of your life, Jeff, you're going to be fine, all right?
Let's go into the takeaways in Major League Baseball right now. What do you got?
Carlos Rodon had a terrible year last year for the Yankees and is off to a really good start, even though he got hit hard the other night. 9-3 3.28 ERA. A couple of years, 3-4 years ago, Gabe Kapler of the Giants, then the manager of the Giants, told me that Carlos Rodon has the best fastball I've ever seen. Like, better than Nolan Ryan, better than Randy Johnson, because of just the way it takes off and the level at which he throws it, the way it comes out of his hand. I've never forgotten that. Finally, we're starting to see Carlos Rodon really good again. This is one reason why the Yankees are playing exceptionally well. And Carlos Rodon, I share a birthday with him, December the 10th.
December
How about that?
the 10th.
Yes.
Look at you go.
Yes. So I looked up who shares a birthday with you. Do you
August
want to
the
hear
9th.
my favorite guys?
Yeah.
Deion Sanders and you have the same birthday.
Really?
Bob Cousy and you have the same birthday. Tell me you know who Bob Cousy is.
Absolutely. I can't believe that I didn't know these. All of my birthday sharing knowledge of mine are pop culture icons.
Right. Well, Bob Cousy's one of the 5 greatest point guards ever. He's one of the 3 greatest Celtics ever, along with Bill Russell and Larry Bird. I met Bob Cousy a few times. He's still alive. He's 95 years old. He's a little guy. He's 6 feet tall. He's got gigantic hands, and his arms are so exceptionally long. This is why he was such a great basketball player. And I still think, and I'm in the vast minority, that if we gave him a year to figure out how to play in today's game, he could play in today's NBA. Most people think I'm crazy, but somebody's got to stand up for somebody who changed the way the point guard position was played, and that's what Bob Cousy did.
He's a great player, and he's a great businessman. I mean, think about the koozie. Everybody has one.
A what?
It's just a dad joke.
Is there a
I was implying that he invented the koozie that goes on your beer.
What is a koozie?
You know what it's like the little sleeve you put on your drink to keep it cold?
Really?
You don't know what a koozie is?
I know what a jacuzzi is. No, I don't know what a koozie is. Jeff,
No wonder why that joke didn't land.
This is why we do this show together, is that I know 3 things in the world: baseball, basketball, and sitcoms from the 60s.
Oh,
you
my
know
gosh.
everything else. There, I learned something today. A koozie, who happens to be number 14 for the Celtics in their prime year.
That's a shock.
All right. Well, here's what I do know, Jeff. Ranger Suarez is on of the Phillies. You named your dog after him.
Yeah, Ranger.
Emily Kurkjian's favorite player is Ranger Suarez. So he's on every show, so we have to get him on. Well, I was looking at the Suarezes the other day. There's Albert Suarez of the Orioles, Ranger Suarez of the Phillies, and Robert Suarez of the Padres. And through Sunday, those guys were 17-1 with a 1.51 ERA and 17 saves.
Wow.
Now, there's a Jose Suarez who pitches for the Angels. He's the 4th Suarez. He's not very good. But I did find it kind of odd that there are 3 guys named Suarez that nobody can hit in the major league. So, Jeff, I went to England, as you know, and first off, the Mets are really starting to roll now. The Mets have won 11 out of 15 through Sunday, and they're finally starting to swing the bats, okay? So JD Martinez has been really hot lately. You know, he's arguably the greatest initial player who goes by his initials, position player in Major League history among position players. It's either JT Realmuto or
JT Snow?
Maybe. I think JT Snow isn't as good as...
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That would be one of my picks.
JT Realmuto, JJ Hardy, DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah.
JD Martinez is really hot right now. So when I was in England, I watched him take batting practice, and he had taken his bat and sliced the barrel right down the middle. So now he's only hitting with half the barrel of the bat. Now, he's always experimenting to try to get better, okay? So I said, JD, what are you doing? He goes, well, I only have half of a barrel, so this teaches me to hit the ball more on the barrel. So I have to make sure I'm going in the right direction with my bat.
Wow.
Never seen anybody do that before.
When I play golf, it feels like I only have half of a club head.
And we're gonna get to golf later, Jeff. A couple other things. This is why baseball is so great. We're talking about Alabama baseball. David Robertson is a really good relief pitcher. He's 39 years old. He's been with a bunch of teams. Really had his best years with the Yankees. So in back-to-back games this week, he struck out Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and Freddie Freeman. 3 up, 3 down, 2 nights in a row, struck them all out.
Wow.
And he's 39 years old, which I just absolutely love.
I mean, that's 3 future Hall of Famers right there. Without a doubt.
Absolutely. This week, given that Aaron Judge is still on an incredible role, like a Babe Ruth, Barry Bonds kind of role, I thought it would come up with the All-Courtroom team or a Law and Order team, however you want to do it. So are you up for this early on in the show?
Well, I did get a degree in political science from Syracuse University.
There you go.
I don't know if you knew that.
And Emily, your wife, was just on jury duty, right?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I won't go too far into it, but my wife was on a jury in which she convicted a woman of murder. Her and her jury mates convicted a woman of murder. And if I can just say, I'm not going to go into details of the case because I think I can because it's, already been tried. But the one takeaway my wife had, who does not care at all about politics, she said it was the coolest experience she's ever been a part of. And that's because she had a judge who was constantly informing them of, here's the process. We want you to enjoy this. We want you to know that this is your civic duty, but it should be fun, for lack of a better term, because you're learning about how this process works. So she made it all about a learning experience. And so my wife said, instead of hoeing and huffing when you get called for jury duty, maybe think, all right, there could be something I learned from this, which I thought was really cool.
All right, so we're going to start with the catcher on we'll call it the All-Courtroom team. Johnny Bench is the catcher, the greatest catcher of all time, who also will be joining us from Cooperstown when we do our live show from Cooperstown during Hall of Fame weekend, end of July.
It's going to be incredible.
First baseman is Ryan Court, which is great. Mm-hmm. Second baseman is Vance Law. There's another Law, Rudy Law, who used to play the outfield for the White Sox, and he was on the same team with George Orta. And occasionally they would hit back-to-back in the order, and it used to be called Law and Orta, which I still just love. So Vance Law at second, Tom Lawless at third. He hit one of the biggest home runs in Cardinals postseason history. Craig Counsell, the shortstop, is our shortstop. He, of course, is the manager of the Cubs. The outfield, of course, starts with Aaron Judge, former Mariners outfielder Al Chambers, and, of course, David Justice, who hit the home run in the 95 World Series and ended up winning it for the Braves. And by the way, one of the most underrated courtroom movies ever is And Justice for All with Al Pacino. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it,
you showed it to me long time ago.
Right. You're supposed to stand for something. All right, never mind. All right, now we're going to break
I couldn't tell if that was when he was the coach of that high school team.
Right.
It's a game of inches. You got to crawl with your fingernails for that inch.
Because never mind.
I can't say the rest.
I can't say the rest of it, but it's the greatest use of the F word in the history of movies.
Any Given Sunday, that's what it was called.
Right. Any Given
movie.
Sunday.
Sorry, I couldn't remember.
Absolutely. So we're breaking all rules. You can only use one name per, because otherwise you'd have 6 guys named Law on the team. But Vernon Law has to be our pitcher because he's Vance Law's father. So you're allowed to use a father-son, especially since it was Father's Day, on the team. John Bale is our left-handed pitcher, and Tony La Russa is the manager. And why would Tony La Russa be the manager? You know this.
Oh, wasn't he a lawyer? He went to law school, right?
Right, yes. And once Harvey Keene, the manager of the Brewers, wasn't real happy with something that Tony La Russa did, and he called him that effing barrister to the media. Because I think he thought Tony was a little too smart for his own good.
Gosh.
So that's our team, Tim, for the week, the All-Courtroom team. And we did that as a tribute to Aaron Judge, who's on just, again, a phenomenal tear for the last 5 weeks. But people are getting interested in this ridiculous thing that we do every week. Yeah. So if anybody out there has an all-something team that you want to add, I did the All-Eclipse team. And one guy it was great. The response we got was great. But one guy said, how could you leave Moonlight Graham off of the All-Eclipse team? And you know what? He's right. And I told you we left Razor Shines off the All-Eclipse team. That guy who set them both in is a genius.
We love it.
I wish I remembered his name.
GreatGameOrWhat.com. You can chime in, send us messages, or, of course, on any of our social medias at Great Game or What. Going to another portion that our listeners love to chime in on with the Kurkjians.
Right, and if anyone has a Kurkjian, it's got to be correct. We can't use it on the air if it's incorrect.
Right.
But if you're positive it's right, we will get it on the air one way or another. So my favorite one this week is, again, with J.D. Martinez. He hit a walk-off homer. He had gone 320 home runs without hitting a walk-off homer. So number 321 was his first walk-off homer. Now, Mark Teixeira, it was the all-time record holder. He hit his first 408 homers without hitting a walk-off. And the only walk-off homer he ever hit in his career was the final one of his career.
Stop.
Number 409. And the kicker is he hit a walk-off grand slam to beat the Red Sox late in September, but the Red Sox had already clinched the American League East, so he beat them, and it didn't matter. They were already winning the division.
Right.
So Tex tells a great story about that, but that's pretty amazing. And we've used this before on the show, but Norm Cash from a different time and a different era hit 377 homers. And not only did he never hit a walk-off homer, he never had a walk-off RBI of any kind in his entire career. Not a walk-off sacrifice fly, single, ground out, hit by pitch, nothing. And he drove over 1,000 runs in his career. This is why baseball is so great, Jeff. These crazy stats appear all the time. So a guy named Adam Benson tweeted the other day. I was very flattered by this. He writes, the Cubs just bunted with 3 consecutive batters. He said, I can't wait to see what Tim and Jeff Kurkjian have to explain this on Is This Great Game or What? So people are actually listening and watching. So Adam, this is for you. By the way, I was all over it anyway. But so it was Patrick Wisdom, Pete Crow Armstrong, and Yan Gomes bunted consecutively. The last time that happened was last year with the Padres when Kim Grisham and Fernando Tatis Jr. bunted in 3 consecutive at-bats. So it did happen last year. But his point was Craig Counsell never bunts. He hated to bunt. He had 7 sacrifice bunts last year while the manager of the Brewers the whole year. This year he's already got 6. So this is what you do. This is what you do when you're trying to score runs.
And we're halfway through June, and he's almost beaten last year.
Right. All right, so Jeff, you know how much I love when a position player pitches. Okay, but what happens, it's not as great anymore because it happens 2-3 times a week now. And it used to be so cool because it would happen like 3 times a year. Now it happens 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. So the other day, Andrew Kisner of the Rangers, he's their backup catcher. They were getting beat 15-2 by the Dodgers. So they had given up 15 runs on 14 hits when they brought a catcher in to pitch. And he pitched an inning and 2/3 innings, allowed no runs and no hits. So how beautiful is this? They absolutely clobbered real pitchers for 7 1/3 innings, and then Andrew Kisner comes in and shuts it down. So James McCann is the backup catcher for the Orioles. Wonderful guy, really smart guy. So he says if any position player pitches for the Orioles, the first thing he tells them is throw it as slow as you can, because our hitters today are so trained to hit a fastball going at a high rate of speed that if you try to throw it 80 miles an hour, that's not a real high rate these days, but that's perfect hitting speed for a baseball player. So James McCann told me when he pitched in a game once, he threw 30 miles an hour because the slower, the better. So this is a relationship show, Jeff. So cousin Mary Shavodian, texted me the other day and said, I can't believe what just happened. Remember last week we talked about the team that the first pitch of the game, Corey Julks hit a home run, and the last pitch of the game, Mike Tauchman was a home run, a walk-off. So the first and the last pitch of the game was a home run. And we looked up, it's been 2 years since anybody did that in a game. First pitch, last pitch, home run. Well, it happened again. In five days later, it happened again. And Mary, your aunt and my cousin called to tell me this because Abraham Toro hit the first pitch of the game, and then Kyle Higashioka of the Padres hit a walk-off homer to end the game. So it hadn't happened in 2 years, then it happened in 5 days. This is why baseball is so beautiful.
And so confusing. How does that happen?
Right.
that long?
I can't explain. So every year, Jeff, I also do the first to 100 strikeouts.
Right.
Okay. And the record for the earliest date to get to 100 strikeouts is June the 15th, and that was Adam Dunn and Joey Gallo. So they both got to 100 strikeouts basically a month before the All-Star game. Keep in mind, Babe Ruth never struck out 100 times in a season. Tony Gwynn never struck out more than 40 times. Joe DiMaggio never struck out 40 times in a season. And now we got guys striking out 100 times by the middle of June. But Ellie De La Cruz,
I knew you were going to bring him up.
he's on every show. You can't do a show
Did
without
you see him
Ellie.
score from second
Yes.
on a
Pickoff throw
failed
that went
pickoff?
between his legs. He's 6'5". He's the
unbelievable.
fastest guy in the league. He's an absolute most exciting player in the game, but he strikes out all the time. So through Sunday, he had 95 strikeouts. He's got a really good shot to be the first one to 100 strikeouts, but he's not going to break the record for the earliest in any season because Adam Dunn and Joey Gallo also have that. By the way, Jeff, there will be more 100 strikeout players this year than there were from 1900 to 1960 combined.
Stop it.
And that happens every year. Jeff, nobody struck out in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and really until the 60s. But now the pitching is so unbelievably good. This is why people swing and miss all the time, because the stuff is spectacular. And last thing, and this is a shout out to Kevin Brown, Syracuse graduate.
Love him.
Great broadcaster for the Orioles. Sunday, like you, it was his first Father's Day.
Aww.
Yeah, so I did a game with him this spring. This is unbelievable. I did a game with him this spring, and we're in Arizona, and I asked him, so how's the baby doing? And he said, great, baby's great, because they just had a baby, right? So I said, what's the baby's name? He said, Emma. So, of course, I have a granddaughter, your niece, Emma Keenahan.
Love
so
her.
I said, what's her middle name? And he said, Kathleen. So Emma Kathleen Brown, Kevin Brown, that's the same name as Emma Kathleen Keenahan.
That's
so here are
crazy.
two guys sitting next to each other, broadcasting a baseball game, and one's daughter is named Emma Kathleen, and the other guy's granddaughter is named Emma Kathleen. So I checked with the Elias on this, and it's the first time in history, Jeff, that two broadcasters sitting next to each other had a daughter and a granddaughter with the exact same first and middle name.
Born the same year.
Right.
Frank at the Elias must be like, Tim, come on.
Right.
We're not Ancestry.com.
Right.
Okay, we can't do that.
Frank is a little tired of me. I've asked him some really dumb questions.
This date in baseball, we love looking back at the history of the game. What are we talking about this
All right,
week?
so Lou Brock was born. Lou Brock has since passed, but Lou Brock, one of the great Hall of Fame outfielders, was born on this date in 1939. He stole 938 bases. Ricky Henderson is the only one that's ever stolen more. And as I told you, Jeff, Lou Brock used to slide feet first every time because he was a big, strong man. And he used to tell me, why would I go in head first when I'm coming in with these big, strong legs and metal spikes? Who wants to tag somebody who's coming in that hard, who's this big with metal spikes on? He was great. So he and Ricky became really good friends. So Ricky is on his way. Ricky's one of my favorite players ever. Ricky is on his way to breaking Lou Brock's stolen base record. This is years ago. So Lou Brock writes the acceptance speech for Ricky Henderson. They join up and write the speech, so when Ricky breaks the record, he'll be able to take out the card and read what he and Lou could, so it would be so respectful, passing of the mantle, all that stuff. So Ricky steals third one day at Oakland to pass Lou Brock. He picks up the base and he puts it over his head, and he had every right to do this. And he said, today I'm the greatest of all time, right? And then that was it. And Lou is up in the press box going, Ricky, what about the speech? He had it in his back pocket of his uniform. and he forgot to read it. So this is why we love Lou Brock. But we love Lou Brock for another reason. You met him.
Yeah.
Tell me when you met him.
I met him at the Hall of Fame. I want to say it was about 2004. I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
Right.
And I met him at the Otis Saga, which was actually at Leatherstocking at the golf course. And he was there, and Dad introduces him to me, and the first thing he says, he shakes my hand with these giant hands, and he says, "You got a great smile. Always remember to smile like that when you meet somebody."
Right. I remember him saying, he says, nothing disarms a person more than a really good smile. Right. And he said, don't ever forget, you need to smile. That's really, really important in this world. I never forgot that. And when Lou Brock died, among the many stories that I told about him, I told that story because anyone who's ever met Lou Brock always remembers what a great man he was. Also, he played in 21 postseason games. He had 391 with 4 homers and 13 RBIs. Jeff, I grew up watching Lou Brock 67, 68 in the World Series. There weren't too many postseason players better than that guy.
What else do we got on this date?
Also on this date, this is just amazing to me because you know how much I like cycles, even though cycles are just a statistical anomaly. They're pretty cool. So in the year 2000, Mike Lansing, who had a great nickname, Laser, because he could run and he could hit the ball really hard. He hit for the cycle in the first 4 innings of a game. So single, double, triple homer in the first 4 innings of the game. Now let's see how well you've listened to me over the last 13 weeks. Give me some guys who never hit for the cycle.
I knew you were going to ask. Willie Mays never hit for the cycle. Babe Ruth never hit for the cycle.
Correct.
I don't think Barry Bonds ever hit for the cycle.
Correct.
Oh gosh, Ted Williams? No. Ted Williams hit for the cycle.
Right.
Oh, I'm missing one. Hold on. I'm going to get it. Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
Hank Aaron never hit for the cycle, right?
Jeff, I'm really proud of you. And Aaron Hill hit for the cycle twice in 8 days. And those guys never hit for the cycle. And Benji Molina hit for the cycle once. And I love Benji Molina, great catcher, one of the slowest people on earth.
Yeah.
And he hit a homer, double, triple, single in the same game. That was great.
It's in the cards. And let's rip them. And let's look through who we got here. Starting off with Hunter Renfroe.
Hunter Renfroe has great power with the Royals, part of the reason why they've played a lot better this year. And I love it, Jeff, that Hunter Renfroe played for the Big Train in Bethesda, Maryland.
Oh my gosh.
I'm a Big Train supporter.
Shirley Povich Field.
Yes, all these guys have come through there. Walter Johnson, named after him, all this stuff. It's really cool. And I find this interesting. He's become good friends with Hunter Renfroe, who's a wide receiver in the NFL. They don't spell their names the same way, but Hunter Renfroe is friends with Hunter Renfroe.
That is funny. How about CC Sabathia card?
All right. Well, we were talking earlier about who's the greatest position player of all time to go by his initials. CC Sabathia is the greatest player, period, ever to go by his initials. And he's going to be a Hall of Famer, maybe even a first ballot Hall of Famer. And by the way, A.J. Hinch of the Tigers is the only manager who has ever gone by his initials in Major League history. How weird is that?
That is weird. Oh, this is a great one. He donned the cover of my MLB The Show. Jazz Chisholm Jr.
Right. Jazz Chisholm is the number 1 guy on the show, right? Is that it?
He's like on the front of the video game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's an infielder who's moved to the outfield. He's incredibly athletic. But I loved it a couple of years ago, Jeff. He was on the same team as Zach Pop. So we had Jazz Chisholm and Zach Pop on the same team, which would mean something to me if I knew anything about music, but I don't.
How about this way throwing it back here with a Royals card, Hal McRae.
Oh, boy.
And Larry Gura.
Oh, boy. All right, so Hal McRae was a really good hitter for a long time. And nobody, and I mean nobody, ran the bases harder than Hal McRae. Of course, Jeff, you can't knock the second baseman or the shortstop over anymore. Go back and watch the way that he annihilated Willie Randolph in a playoff game once. It was unbelievable. You got to Google it. As for Larry Gura, this is just to show you what editors can do. And we all need editors, and I've loved my editors over the years. But a friend of mine wrote a story advancing the winter meetings. And he wrote, this is in the early 80s, that the Royals might not trade Larry Gura because he's a 10-5 guy. That means 10 years in the league last 5 years with the same team. That gave him no trade rights. Well, the writer accidentally wrote it that he's a 5-10 guy, and the editor changed it to, it doesn't look like Larry Gura is going to be traded because he's 5'10". What is he too short to get traded? This is ridiculous.
Royce Lewis.
All right, Royce Lewis is back finally with the Twins, and every time he plays, he produces. He just can't stay on the field because he always gets hurt. I really feel sorry for him. He's had 3 major injuries, including one this year, but through Sunday, he had played in 12 games and hit 7 home runs. And I'll never forget the first time I ever met him, Twins camp years and years ago. He's like 20 years old. He's going to be the star of the team someday. He comes rolling in on a skateboard. He comes into the clubhouse in the morning riding a skateboard. Like, I don't know how anyone can do that. Can you ride a skateboard?
Absolutely not. No. No.
I would fall on my head in a minute. You know me, Jeff. If you keep me on my own 2 feet, I've got a chance. But ice skating, roller skating, skiing of any sort, and especially skateboarding, 0 chance.
All right, next up, Dalton Varsho.
His dad is Gary Varsho. Dalton Varsho plays the outfield for the Blue Jays, and he's a really good defensive player. So on Father's Day this year, he hit a grand slam. So he's got, and his dad, Gary, played in the big leagues. So we looked it up on Sunday. Dalton has now hit 3 grand slams in his career, 2 this year. And his dad, Gary, who was one of the funniest, best guys I ever met, never hit a grand slam. His son already has 3.
Last but not least, Larry Parrish.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I really hesitate to tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Larry Parrish could really hit, Jeff. He was one of the strongest as far as hitting the ball hard.
Yeah.
Top 5 that I've ever seen in my life. That's how hard he hit it. So 1983, Larry Parrish's wife has a baby. And he misses a game in Minneapolis because he was home because his wife had a baby. So I'm covering the team, Texas Rangers, for the Dallas Morning News, and Larry's not at the game. So I say to Doug Rader, the mischievous manager of the Rangers, where's LP? Why isn't he here? And he goes, oh, his wife had a baby. So that's why he missed the game. So I need details from my Ranger notes, like Larry Parrish wasn't here last night. His wife had, I said, so what's the baby's name? He goes, Buford. So I said, Buford? Now, Larry Parrish will be and acknowledged he calls himself this redneck from Florida, but I said he did not name his son Buford. And Doug Rader, I pushed him 3 times on this, and he says, I swear to God, he named his son Buford. So, of course, I put it in the paper the next day that Larry Parrish missed a game because his wife had a baby boy, and his name is Buford. So the next day, he gets to the Metrodome. We're on the road. He comes up to me, walks right up to me, and he's got a kind of a forlorn look on his face, and he goes, Tim, the boy's name ain't Buford. So he said his name is Joshua. And I go to Doug Rader and I said, how could you do that to me? You did that on purpose. You ambushed me. You made me look terrible. And he goes, I didn't think you believed me. I said, you swore on your grandmother's grave that his name was Buford. So the kicker to the whole thing is that when Joshua Parrish got in trouble, like as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, whenever he got in trouble, they would look at him and go, Buford, you're not supposed to do that. So that was my only way out of that.
We're going to have to call Buford Parrish at some point, get him on the show.
Yeah. Oh, that was great.
All right, so let's go to League in Lids. We've put every Major League Baseball team in here. Each week we take a different one out. And you've got the Boston Red Sox this week to choose from.
Well, that's your grandfather, Pop's favorite team growing up. Yeah. And I love this, Jeff.
Watertown, Massachusetts represent.
Absolutely. Big Armenian outpost,
huge.
Of course. So, right, yes. So Stephen Kurkjian is our cousin. My cousin, your uncle. Stephen Kurkjian is a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner on the Spotlight team at the Boston Globe. He is the greatest investigative reporter at the Boston Globe. The movie Spotlight, which won an Academy Award, was the team that he put together. And even though they basically left him out of the movie, it was a great movie. And they used to say, because he exposed criminals all over Boston, they used to say the 6 worst words in the English language for anyone corrupt was, Stephen Kurkjian is on the phone. I mean, that's how good he was.
They knew he was on to you.
So he texted me the other day to say, because it was first game of the Yankees-Red Sox season series. This was last Friday night at Fenway, and he just texted me to say, just want to let you know I'm going to the game tonight at Fenway. And he said, the first game I ever saw the Yankees and the Red Sox play was in 1948 because my aunt took me and she said, you need to see Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio on the field at the same time. Wow. And Jeff, this is why baseball is so wonderful. This is why I love it so much. This is why we do this show, is that my cousin, who's this decorated reporter, writer in the history of Boston, he can't wait to go to a Red Sox-Yankee game in his 70s because it meant something to him, because in 1948, his aunt took him there to make sure he understood what he was watching. And this many years later, he still loves it and still understands. And 2 years ago, he took his grandson, Teddy, to the Little League World Series in Williamsport, and they stayed for the entire time and watched every game. To me, that's what baseball is all about. Father-son, father-daughter, and in this case, grandfather-grandson went to the Little League World Series. Love it.
Our Kurkjian Quandary today, it's where we go back and forth, because this is what Dad and I do, and the women in our lives hate it. So we thought we'd bring it to the podcast so we don't do it in front of them any longer. The U.S. Open just wrapped up on Father's Day this past Sunday.
And it was in Pinehurst, Jeff.
Yeah.
So usually the toughest course that anyone plays all year is the U.S. Open course. It's like 7,500 yards. The rough is unbelievable. It's usually in Baltusrol. I'm no golf expert. So Pinehurst was really hard. I don't think it's the hardest U.S. Open venue. But this is my hypothetical question. And I've never been more confident about anything in my life than I am about this. All right, follow me now. 18 handicap, okay? Who's playing on his little, municipal course, 5,800 yards from the white. Now, I'm not trying to belittle anyone.
And he's trying to break 90.
He's like trying to break 90
every
but
time.
He's also raking 3-foot putts. That's a gimme.
Yeah.
He's fixing the ball in the fairway and in the rough. He's not even playing by the rules because he doesn't even know the rules, because the rules of golf are so precise. So here's the question. If we take that 18 handicap and we drop him into a threesome, we'll call it, on the final day of the U.S. Open. The U.S. Open that is sometimes won with a +1. We're not minus 25 winning a tournament, +1. What does that guy shoot if these are the rules? He has to finish every hole. He has to play by every rule of golf. And he is paired with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson.
So he doesn't play the Kurkjian rules of no more than a triple?
No. There's no capping with a triple. There are no gimmies. You play the rules of the game. So I've asked this question to a lot of people. And you know what the first thing most people say is? He would shoot 125. Really? 125? He's going to shoot 90, breaking all the rules on a 5,800-yard course.
So he's breaking all the rules on the easy course, which means he's probably hitting closer to like 100. So I'm arguing. So he's giving himself 10 strokes. So he's really not an 18 handicap. I get what you're saying.
But he thinks he is.
He's going to shoot a 25 on a hole because he's going to go in the water. And he's going to get lost. He's never played in front of fans.
Right.
That's going to create a whole
He's scared to death playing in front of Tiger. He's not even going to be able to take it back.
He shoots 205.
All right. Well, that's so interesting you should say that,
That's
Jeff.
what I think.
I started out at 180. I said, if he thinks he's a 90s player, you have to double his score. He's going to score 180. He's going to average a 10 every hole. That's what he's going to average. Because if he makes a 25, which he might, because he can't hit it over that water, or he can't get it out of the trap, or he can't get it out of the rough, and he's never putted a green quite like that, I think he's shooting 180. So I asked this question to my dear friend, the late, great Ed Farmer, former Major League pitcher, who was also a scratch golfer in his day. So I laid out the exact same scenario that I did to you. And I swear to God, Jeff, I wasn't more than 15 seconds into the explanation of what this entailed. And he looked at me and he said, 200.
Yeah.
200. I honestly believe, an 18 handicap who's raking 3-footers and isn't playing by the rules and is playing with Tiger and Phil is going to shoot 200 on the final day of the Masters.
Averaging 12 a hole is 216. And when you think about it as shooting 216, you're like, that's way too high. But when you think about averaging a 12, that's not out of the question. Because as we said, what if there's a green he can't reach on a par 3?
Right. Well,
and he's in the water 7 times.
I've asked 18 handicaps this question. They said, well, I would just hit 3 7-irons into a par 4. Oh, really? And you think you're going to stand on the tee and groove a 150-yard 7-iron and do it 3 times in a row under this kind of pressure?
And thinking that 150 yards is even going to get you to a safe landing zone?
Right. Not happening. Yeah. 200. I'm with you.
What do you think? What score? This is our Kurkjian Quandary. What score would an 18 handicap score at the U.S. Open with all of the pressure? Now, our guest today is Doug Glanville. Oddly enough, he came up and it's in the cards last week, and now we got him on this week to talk about the Rickwood game that's happening. Major League Baseball has it on this Thursday, which will be, the 20th, June 20th.
Right. And again, Jeff, part of the reason they're doing the Rickwood game is just how old the ballpark is. Right. But all the great players, as we'll talk to Doug, who came out of that area. I mean, Willie Mays is from Alabama, and he's the greatest player I've ever seen. And to me, my list, after Babe Ruth, he's the greatest player of all time. Wow. So the thing about Willie Mays, and I've written so many words about him, it's one of the great thrills of my life to write about him on his 90th birthday, was how big and strong his hands are. You know how fascinated I am, Jeff, by size of guys' hands. I've never shook a man's hands that were stronger than Willie Mays's in my life. As Pete Rose said, Pete Rose once told me, Willie, he's no bigger than me. And he hit 660 homers, and I hit 160 homers because Willie Mays was that strong. And Dwayne Kuiper, former Major League player, who's got gigantic hands. He grew up on a farm. He was a weak man overall, he told me, but he said, I got really strong hands. He says, my dad always told me, you have to win a handshake when you shake somebody's hand. And he said, with Willie, you couldn't. Oh, that's how strong his hands were. And then who's from Mobile?
Well, I mean, I think Hank Aaron.
Hank Aaron is from Mobile. So Hank Aaron is one of the 5 greatest players of all time. And I told you we had him on the air for a game for 4 innings several years ago, highlight of my entire career. And during that time, he told me something I'd never heard before, that he was a switch hitter until he started to play pro ball. He was a switch hitter. And he also used to hit cross-handed. We knew that. Think about that, Jeff. Instead of right hand on top of the left, he did it the other way around, and they had to switch him out of that. So I said to Hank, where did those really strong hands and wrists, historically strong hands and wrists, come from? And he goes, well, my dad was a boxer. He had really strong hands. And he said, and he also used to deliver giant bricks of ice to people's houses.
No way.
And the only way to carry it was using those tongs. Those
giant
tongs, and he would hold them to each side. And he said, and I used to deliver ice with my dad, and I had to learn how to hold those giant bricks of ice out with only these tongs. He said, that's where my strong hands and wrists come from. So Ozzie Smith, of course, was born in Mobile. Ozzie Smith, to me, is the greatest shortstop defensively of all time. I'm not even sure there's a close second.
Is he the greatest number 1 of all time?
He is the greatest number 1 of all time, from Ozzie to Oral.
Set you up.
Right. Arguably, shortstop's the most important defensive position. I think you can make a case that Ozzie Smith is the greatest defensive player of all time at any position, and that's Willie Mays in center field, Johnny Bench behind the plate, and a bunch of others. And I've told you this before, Jeff, but one of the great thrills of everyone's lifetime, especially those people in St. Louis, was when opening day, Ozzie Smith would run out to the field on opening day and do a backflip and land right at shortstop. I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it to this day. I said, Ozzie, how could you do that? He goes, well, I was a gymnast when I grew up. So when you watched him hit the ground and bounce up real quickly and make a throw, it's because he's used to bouncing up and down on a mat because he was a gymnast as a kid. All right, so there's so many players from Alabama, and I love Billy Williams, sweet swinging Billy Leo Williams. And he and Hank Aaron were really good friends. Billy Williams was one of the great gap hitters in the Major League. Leagues, Cubs, especially 60s and 70s. So I always loved this, though, that Hank and Billy Williams were really close friends. And Hank Aaron married a woman who had been married once before, so she used her first husband's name. And Hank Aaron married a woman named Billy Williams, which I just thought that is just priceless. One of the greatest Hall of Fame players, Billy Williams, and Hank Aaron's dear friend, Hank Aaron married a woman named Billy Williams.
That's crazy.
Right. So that's what we're looking for, and that's what Doug Glanville is going to explain to us here in just a couple minutes, is the importance and the significance of this game in Rickwood.
We have a very special guest with us, a teammate of my dad. Dad, who do we have with us?
We have my great friend, Doug Glanville. We just spent like a week together in England. It was tremendous. But today, Doug is going to talk to us about Major League Baseball playing a regular season game at Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama on Thursday, June the 20th. So, Doug, just tell us, what is the significance of baseball coming to Rickwood Field?
Well, Tim, it's a huge acknowledgement, and in some ways, when you fuse your history together, which was always American history, it's an important step, because those leagues for the many years obviously produced incredible baseball players that became hugely part of the fabric of Major League Baseball. But as important was their contributions off the field, the social change that flowed through them in challenging America to kind of live up to its greatest tenets, this great experiment of making it a more perfect union, and recognizing that these Negro Leagues and the players around them, this was business, this was entrepreneurship, this was survival, this was a way to navigate segregation and disparate treatment, and through that garden became this incredible connection to baseball, a game that we all love here. And just to be able to take that moment and go to the site of where many of these great players flowed through, and not just the names we know, but the anonymous players that still were important to moving our society forward, what it meant to those communities of color, those Black players, this environment in Birmingham and beyond. It had such a ripe experience that tied things together, the entrepreneurship, the businesses that supported it, and the sort of self-actualization. So when you bring those stories together into one baseball, that's great for everybody, right? Because we're bringing the stories that are so important to us about what we love about the game, right? The perseverance and the overcoming and the patience it takes to excel at this game, and why we love it so much. So right, baseball taking that step is huge.
Right. Doug, are you amazed like I am at the number of great players that came out of that region in Alabama? I mean, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Billy Williams, Ozzie Smith, just to name a few. How do you explain that?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to explain. And I just think of my grandfather, who was from Rocky Mount, and my mom grew up in that area. And he'd always ask me, "You still hitting that ball?" He'd always want to know about baseball, right? And every day, he just like, "You still hitting that ball?" So he loved baseball. And I think, look, Jackie Robinson was such a moment because of obviously a color line, but also, the international community was watching, right? Whether Panama, just to see how America was going to handle color, and where was America going to say what we put in that Constitution we were going to live by all people, right? Created equal. And so I think the fact that you have this concentration of incredible talent in the South, maybe the weather certainly, could help playing year round, although 110 degrees with mosquitoes may not be that great. But I think the opportunity to flourish with this great talent, which is why Rickwood is so important, because there is something about that center of gravity that matters to baseball and some of the greatness that came through the game. And why not kind of go to that sort of eco center, right? It's the epicenter, so to speak, to where we know that baseball thrived.
Now, Doug, you have been a part of the East-West game in Cooperstown, and obviously this is a huge example of putting the Negro Leagues on the front lines, right, of everybody's attention and mind. And this year, Ken Griffey Jr., a bit of like the ringleader. So many people were so excited to see him a part of that. It was so cool to see what was happening on and off the field at the East-West game. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of that and being a part of it yourself?
Well, that was incredible, and it really, truly was. I mean, I was part of this project way in advance, almost 2 years ago, because I was helping kind of put together the exhibit. And we were just discussing what should go into it. Because remember, with the East-West Classic, the game itself was also the launching of a new exhibit called The Souls of the Game. And it's, just talking about Black baseball, and not only just on the field, as you mentioned, but like on a societal level. And so getting to be part of that was always exciting to figure out, like, what history do you include and what do we talk about? How do we frame this story? But also the opportunity to say, well, the Hall of Fame said, well, let's turn this into something bigger, because now we can bring the exhibition that was always the All-Stars, the Negro League All-Stars, so to speak, in this East-West Classic. That took place in Major League Baseball stadiums, by the way. They sold out. It was sort of a indicator of the business possibility that Branch Rickey and others could see. Like, wait a minute, now there's a lot of fans here. We could make some money on this too. So I think the East-West Classic brought that, people came far and wide to watch this incredible talent. And so we recreated that at the Hall of Fame with CC Sabathia on one side, Chris Young recruiting players to come together, and I was just part of the mix. And it was, to me, it was a gigantic family reunion, just the generations coming together. I thought about my granddad, and when I saw like Sam Allen or Pedro Sierra, but I thought about all the players I loved as a kid growing up, watching, and then ultimately playing against, like an Ozzie Smith. And then I thought later that I was kind of the older guy on the team. And then whether it was Monet Davis or Adam Jones or guys who came later, that they actually knew me as a player and were compared to me as an athlete. And so to bring it in one fabric, right, to weave that together and do it around the joy of baseball, because I'll tell you what, we had a lot of fun. We had home runs, we had all kinds of stuff. We had pulled hamstrings. We had it all, and I think it all came together, around the things that I think of in family reunion. Food, we all kind of ate together. We celebrated. We kind of partied together. We had family around. My kids, my wife came, and to introduce them to people that were significant in my life in one room. I mean, it was like a wedding, right? And I think within that, we just found so much joy. So when we did the autograph session after the game at the Hall of Fame, I remember a fan coming over to me and just saying, you guys played with so much joy. I think that was important to see, because despite the weight of history, right, you're talking about integration and some of the challenges and some painful episodes that the exhibit displays, whether it's the fight for equality or, what happened with the Negro Leagues eventually in the 60s when it kind of evaporated. But there was also an important part to circle that we were joyous. We were there together, happy to play baseball and express it openly. And we did it with all these people that cared about the game and our own families. And so to have that experience was just transcendent. I mean, the ribbon cutting to the exhibit and walking that, just seeing who was on that stage. I mean, the wins above replacement on that stage was just like, you have to go way past the decimal point. This was ludicrous to see who was on that stage. And the poetry of the moment. So it was a great honor to be in. And I didn't blow out. I wasn't the hamstring guy. That was Joey Hairston Jr. So I made it through. That was a victory in and of itself.
Jeff,
so Doug
took BP in England, in London, and every time he swung the bat, he hit it on the barrel like at 100 miles exit velocity. How did you do in the East-West game, Doug? Did you swing it well?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Like, I probably should send you a recording, because I never posted it. But the first time, about 4 or 5 days before the East-West Classic, I decided that I need to work out a little bit, right? So I go to the batting cage, and before I go in, I record myself for like 2.5 minutes about the disaster that it is. Because I passed on the way, ironically, on the way to the batting cage, I passed a bunch of pickleball courts, and I was like, maybe that's what I should be doing. I don't know if I should be doing this, right? So it was like, it was an omen, right? So I go in and I kind of talk about it. And then I hit, and it was like, okay, it's not bad. I hit off the tee, and I had to order some bats from Louisville Slugger. And that was like a little bit of a slap in the face, right? Because I was a Louisville Slugger athlete all my whole career. R219, tapered, Walker finish, I had all the stuff, right? And then I call Louisville Slugger, and I'm just like the guy off the street. I'm like, I was a player. They're just like, excuse, please hold on the line, sir. I'm like, okay, you know, I'm waiting for a bat order, and like they're like transferring me and like giving me the runaround. I'm like, come on, man, I can't get a. I'm like, I'm trying to explain, I'm playing in the East West Classic, and I need my bat. And they're like, dude, I hear the music, the music going on. So finally, I get, you know, so I got desperate, man. I called the Phillies. And I said, look, man, I'm like no longer have any clout with Louisville Slugger. So do you have a contact number? So they gave me the number, and he's like, why didn't you call me in the beginning? So I tried to like do it. So they were able to get me a bat order. It was like a Ronald Acuna model, a little skinny for my taste, but I got the bat. And then I ended up finding in storage some R219s. And so I ended up bringing all these bats. And when I saw CC Sabathia pulling up to the hotel, he was like, that's a lot of bats. I was like, well, I'm trying to, you know, share the wealth here. So Adam Jones won the home run derby, and he won it with my bat. So I felt like I won the derby, coaching him through it. But, you know, I hit, and in the game, I faced Jose Contreras and Tyson Ross. And we're always like right before the game, we were a little nervous because, you know, I was talking to Tony Wynn Jr., and we were like, how hard are you going to go? How hard are you going to go? We were trying to gauge like how much we put on the accelerator. Knowing that at 100 we're going to blow out. So Tony and I are talking, and you know, so at some point, you know, we try to figure out like a little bit of a strategy. Like, all right, we're going to go hard. So Jose Contreras is pitching, and I got a 1-0 count. And I hit a good, you know, nice line drive, a little air under it, in right center. Now, of course, the guy who retired like last year is playing center, so that's not really fair. I needed Jim Rice out there. All right, Jim Rice out there, that's a triple. But no, we have Dexter Fowler out there, of course, running it down. Like, you know, it's like, dude, like you played last week. I mean, come on, you got to let that drop. So he doesn't let it drop. I get, you know, so I'm out. But I did, you know, my walk rate, which was like negative 0.5 when I played, I actually walked in this game and scored. So I ended up scoring the second run, and then Ryan Howard hit a 3-run homer. So I felt like I did something. But it was great that my kids and my wife got to see me one last time, and my kids finally old enough to appreciate it. So it was really incredible, and we had, most importantly, a lot of fun.
Yeah, Doug, that sounds like a great time. And just hearing it in your voice, I was going to ask how important this is compared to your playing days and now your broadcasting days. But it sounds like for you, being a part of this exhibit, being a part of this game, and being a part of Cooperstown to help elevate all of this information, just to me from your voice, it sounds like this is maybe one of the greatest honors to be a part of this. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, fundamentally, it's about belonging, right? And I think we all look for very similar things, no matter how we identify, where we come from. You know, we want respect, we want opportunity, we want fairness, we want, you know, to be acknowledged, your contributions. And you know, now we're in a very trying era, right, of like misinformation, misdirection, and sometimes just running the clock out, like hoping that people just forget. And I think when you come together around this like truth telling, right, the unfiltered sense of the contribution of these great players who were Black and just were not given many opportunities. And you think about what happened, you know, there was a moment in American history where, okay, emancipation, slavery's over, and we had a chance to kind of say, let's coalesce now about amongst equals. And unfortunately, we kind of chose as a country Jim Crow. We chose Jim Crow. And that's what separated us and created all this, you know, nightmare stories about the failure to get to equality on so many levels. But in that sort of dust became this will to say, okay, well, if this is our circumstance, let's create something. Let's build something great. And it's so cool to be associated with that, because one of the great institutions was baseball in the Black community. And I went to a forum last night, and I learned that there was, and I want to get this right, but the top 3 Black institutions in America, baseball was third. It was insurance was one, because you couldn't get insurance. And actually C.J. Walker, Madam C.J. Walker was the other by herself, and baseball, right? So, you know, you flow through this, you know, business, corporate sensibility, and you realize like this was so much more than just like between the white lines, right? A bat and a ball and catch the ball, hit the ball. It was so much more on what it meant. So being part of that, recognized and contributing to the exhibit, getting on the field amongst, you know, family and friends, and just kind of, like you said, elevating something that's been slowly getting to the point where now there's so much being done to kind of recognize it and absorbing the stories, right? I mean, what an honor to be part of these stories of like pioneers and people who went through so many things to bring this game to life. Tony Stone, you could go on the list. So I feel like just being part of that history is a great honor.
Well, Doug, and this all comes on the heels, too, of the long-awaited, much-needed news for Negro League statistics to be incorporated into Major League statistics. And when this decision came down, what was your reaction?
Oh, I felt exuberant. I felt exuberant. I know as a stat numbers guy and an engineer, there's complications, of course, because you have to go back in the research over the last, I think, since 2020. But the door was really kicked open when 2020 happened. And the shortened season with the pandemic opened the door to say, well, 60 and 80 games is a season, right? These stats matter. And that the Negro Leagues was typically in that range. So then the floodgates were open. And now 1969, they convened to discuss this, and they took all these other stats from leagues in the 1870s or whatever, and skipped over, literally continued the invisibility of these black ball players. So there was opportunities, but this was another chance to really look at it through a different lens, where now you had absolute precedent around 60-game schedules. And, look, is it imperfect? Of course it is, the numbers and trying to figure out. But once again, the fork in the road that our country took, we had a chance, after slavery ended, to go a different direction. And when we decided to go this way and kind of criminalize being black and all the things that built generations of inequity, when we made that decision, and then we had to own it. We have to own it. And baseball has to own it as well. Like the challenge we have of trying to make equality out of this is, of course, murky. But that's what we built on. And now, it's hard, but it's supposed to be hard because of the pathway we elected to choose and create these two societies, right? These two worlds that Jackie Robinson, became sort of a bridge at some point, but many others before him. So I think it's nice to see that, we know these numbers, but as we have both all lived in this life of baseball, there's stories within those numbers. And you're not just taking on just statistics or a 730 OPS or whatever. You're taking on the lifeblood of these players that did so much to go through X, Y, and Z to just get on the field. And I think those stories are important to now share because it is now one umbrella of baseball. And I think it's also important to still let it stand on its own for what it's meant and what they were able to achieve and build. Because, when you build something in the black society, when you're building something in the 20s, it's not Field of Dreams, right? It's not build it and they will come. It's build it and we're still scared you're going to steal it, which is what happened a lot. Or we're going to build it and you might literally burn it to the ground, like Tulsa, right? And there's examples after examples of that, from the Harlem Renaissance in the fashion industry to the music industry and the black music and so on. So there's a big leap of faith to say, we're still doing this, right? We love this. We are still doing this. And we're appealing to the future. We're appealing to a world we don't even see yet. We're appealing to equity that hasn't even come yet. We're appealing to something that's not even identified. We're not even experiencing in real time, but we can hope and see that one day this will come. And I think that part of that coming is this transfer of these statistics and this sort of fusion of statistics. And I think it just makes baseball stronger. It makes baseball more honest and direct. And it may create some complexities in the statistics, but maybe when it does, it sparks a conversation. It's like, well, why are we looking at Josh Gibson? Let's talk about that. I think that's actually a good thing to contextualize. And so we get a little bit away from the numbers never lie, because we know that numbers have their own bias in it, because we choose what we want to choose. If I told you, like, I know Tim knows a lot of my stats. If I said, well, Tim, if I go off of my batting average against the Kansas City Royals, I'm in the Hall of Fame. I mean, if I choose whatever numbers I want, because I was like 11 for 14 off those guys, right? So that's one number, but I could also choose something, what I hit in Turner Field, which was like under 200. So I could be the greatest player on earth if I choose whatever numbers, or I could be the worst player on earth. And that's what we love about baseball, because we can find statistics to make someone exceptional or make someone irrelevant, right? And the problem from a racial standpoint is we tried to make these black players irrelevant for too long. And I think it was high time, as I said in the article in the Atlantic, I said we spent so much time putting zeros on their backs and slapping zeros on there, we kind of forgot the humanity that we needed to have.
Yeah.
And now we're doing something about that.
Yeah, right. Doug, real fast, Dad and I talked about this on the podcast, and the thing that we reiterated was the thing I was seeing on social media of that was somewhat negative. There was a lot of positive, but of the negative comments, they say, well, you know, Satchel Paige never faced Babe Ruth. And I said, Babe Ruth never faced Satchel Paige. I mean, it goes both ways, right? And you could make the argument, would these white players be as good if they were playing against these black, right? It goes both ways, but people don't really look at it. And that's kind of the hill I like to die on when it comes to any conversation about that is it's not just they weren't facing, you know, players in the major leagues. It's those major leaguers weren't facing the Negro leaguers, and their stats might have been adjusted and changed. Sorry, Dad, go ahead. That's my hill, and I'm dying on it. Go ahead.
Well, Doug, Buck O'Neill told me 20 years ago the best player of all time was Willie Mays, but he told me the greatest player I've ever seen was Oscar Charlton. I'd just like to know what you think if we saw Oscar today in his prime, what that would look like.
I mean, I don't know. I'm only going off of what I read and learned. I mean, I feel like there's a kind of Ronald Acuna Jr. in this thing last year. I mean, the everything man, like he kind of did it all. And some level, a lot of the Negro Leagues players had to. They didn't have 25-man rosters. They had smaller rosters. So they had to be double duty Radcliffe, and they had to do a lot of things. So those opportunities, you know, we don't know. They're somewhat anecdotal in certain levels, and now a little bit more statistical, thankfully. But to your point, Jeff, I think the idea that, well, one of the biggest points of evidence is like, well, just look at the next generation of ball players. Not even after the Negro Leagues. I mean, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Billy Williams, Ernie Banks. Just go on the list. These are the greatest players ever play the game. Period. So they were doing something right, and they were playing against somebody good because that's who came out of the Negro Leagues and the next generation of black baseball players. And you don't just get that out of the sky, right? You have to develop that. So I think that's also to the point about like who's playing against who. And once again, we as a country made the decision to make it like that, right? The quotas and the Landis, all the stuff that they did to keep black players out. They made that choice to make it hard to compare in some ways. Didn't have to be that way. So I think it's, you know, it's going to be imperfect trying to fix it later when we could have addressed it then, but that's what we built on. And now I look forward, and my daughter, who's 8 years old, one day will look, and 30 years from now be like, this will be normalized. And I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
All right. Last thing for me, Doug. What are you hoping that the game in Rickford does for Major League Baseball?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to bring those stories to life. And there's so many. I think that the power of those stories, and realize that they are truly baseball stories. They're universal stories. They're American stories. They're international stories of hope and change, pain and principles. That is important. And I think the more they can celebrate that and see everyone in this environment, right? This homeland of the oldest stadium out there, right? And be able to see that, like, yeah, baseball existed here. It's almost like bringing the stadium to life, and the echoes that come through. And I think the other important thing is more than just, you know, Willie Mays and all these great players we name. There's a lot of players that are kind of nameless and anonymous. And I wrote a poem called Anonymous that I'm hoping to, put through with ESPN. I think they're considering it. But just we always talk about standing on the shoulders of, but, you know, you kind of think about what's on their name, what's on their back. And a lot of times it's blank, right? You know, there's so much blank of people we don't identify that might have played for a week, but meant something to the neighborhood that they came from, to the fans. They were someone's husband, whatever it may be. So I'm hoping baseball will tie this all together really well at that major league level, right? What we're associated with, and bring it all into that one home, and the Giants and Cardinals and the teams that will be able to celebrate that. Well, the history is rich. And the Cardinals, look, you think about, you know, Curt Flood, right? You think of players that changed the game through going through the court system. The American system did it by the law, by the book, tried to make change that way. You think about how many black players they had that came through, Lou Brock and so on. That's significant. Of course, the Giants, whether it's Willie Mays or Willie McCovey, there's so many examples that these teams represent. So I'm loving it, but I love to see like that connection, right? We are one tapestry, and baseball is such a great opportunity to do that and over this game and what the stories we'll learn that are just going to blow our minds.
We look forward to hearing that poem. My dad did say, however, that it was, quote, unfair that you are a former Major League Baseball player who also is a better writer than him. He did say that on the podcast because he really enjoyed your poetry. It's true. He said he was a little bit angry, and Timmy doesn't get angry over there. So, Doug, thank you so much for joining. It's just a great game or what to emphasize the importance of the Rickwood Field game and, of course, the East-West game and the Negro League Incorporation. This was really informative, and it was great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Pleasure being on. Thank you so much.
Right. Thanks for being with us, Doug. We'll see you soon, well before next year in England.
Doug Glanville, thank you so much for joining us. My favorite moment being when he was really upset that Dexter Fowler was even allowed to play because he retired a week ago, basically.
Right. He wanted Jim Rice to be a Hall of Famer, Jim Rice in center field.
Well, there's a lot of athletes, of course, all former athletes, all current athletes playing in that. What were some of the best plays from this year?
Well, I just love it, Jeff, that even after this amount of time the guys have been retired, they still want to show that they could still play. Right. So Adam Jones was a really good outfielder. You remember Adam Jones.
Of course.
Played for the Orioles, number 10. Started his career, his professional career as a shortstop, and then they turned him into an outfielder. So after Jerry Hairston Jr., our pal, tore his hamstring making a jump throw in the East-West game, Adam Jones took over at shortstop. And the final out of the East-West game played in Cooperstown was Adam Jones going to his left, one-handed play, spins, throws a strike to first. I saw him in England. He lives in Barcelona now. I saw him in England, and I said, Adam, tell me about the last play you made in the East-West game. And he looked at me like he's never played before in his life. He said, you should have seen it. Oh, my gosh. I told everyone I could still play shortstop after. He's kidding, but he's not kidding. He just wants people to know, A, he's still a great athlete. B, he could still do some things. And most important, C, he came up as a shortstop. And then maybe the last play he'll ever make as a shortstop, he does it to end the East-West game in Cooperstown. Just beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for listening to another edition of Is This a Great Game or What? Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we really appreciate you. And as always, thank you for being a part of our family.